The news that doesn't even feel like news anymore. The Dead Sea is dying and its shores are falling apart. Every year the water level drops by almost 4 feet and most of the sea is now about 950 feet deep. Sounds like a lot, but that's 15% shallower than just 50 years ago. The sea surface area has also shrunk by 1/3. As the lake retreats, and technically the Dead Sea is a lake, it reshapes the landscape around it. It's beautiful but kind of eerie. Where water once was, salt formations emerge. But besides these strange shapes, you can also see apocalyptic scenes of abandoned beaches and parking lots swallowed by sinkholes along the shore. And these sinkholes can be found pretty much everywhere the sea has retreated over the past 50 years. Being there means constantly putting your life and health at risk because a sinkhole can open up right under your feet at any moment. All of this spans more than 116 square miles of land left bare by the receding sea, and it keeps growing. Why is this happening? Well, while government officials blame climate change and 15 years of record drought, environmentalists and scientists are sure the damage is mostly caused by human activity. This isn't global climate change, says Gideon Bromberg, the Israeli director of EcoPeace Middle East, an Israeli-Jordanian-Palestinian organization focused on environmental peace building. This is government-licensed exploitation of our most valuable resource. But why did the Dead Sea dry up in the first place? And is there any way to fix it? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. But first, let me sip my coffee ASMR style. Just an unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video, just in case it slipped your mind. Let's start with the basics. The Dead Sea is a landlocked, extremely salty lake. It's so salty that its water composition doesn't let macroscopic aquatic creatures like fish or plants survive. Only a tiny number of bacteria and fungi can handle that level of salinity. That's why people call it the Dead Sea, and consider it one of the saltiest bodies of water on Earth. On both of its shores, you'll find Israel and Jordan. The Dead Sea is the lowest spot on Earth. It sits in the Al Gore region, known for its dry climate, scorching temperatures, and little rainfall. The very location of the lake itself seems to be part of the problem causing it to shrink. Right now, things aren't looking great. The Dead Sea requires an additional 184 to 211 billion gallons per year just to stay at its current level, and more than 264 billion gallons to return to its 1995 level. Every day, the Dead Sea loses as much water as 600 Olympic-sized pools. What's the reason? It's the water source. 60 years ago, the Jordan River used to bring 264 billion gallons into the Dead Sea. Today, less than 10% of that makes it there. Thing is, the water flowing into the Dead Sea has no natural outlet, which makes it an endorheic lake. Kind of like the final stop for the Jordan River. The water level in the Dead Sea depends on its water balance, and in recent decades, that balance has been negative. Less and less water has been making its way into the sea. And this is a problem created by humans, not even because we've sped up global warming. It's just that in a region where water is scarce, Israel, Jordan, and Syria have redirected fresh water sources feeding the Dead Sea to drinking water and irrigation in the past few decades. Not enough water is flowing from the streams, and there are simply no large rivers in Israel. This graph clearly shows how, starting from around the 1930s, the water level in the Dead Sea has lost its stability and slowly began to drop. Until the 1930s, about 317 billion gallons of water would flow south into the Jordan Valley from the Sea of Galilee, or as it's also called, Lake Tiberias. Most of this water would reach the Dead Sea and help keep the water level stable. Then the southern end of the Sea of Galilee was blocked off by a dam, turning it into a reservoir to supply water to the growing population of the Galilee region. But in general, both Jordan, Syria, and Israel, all of them take water from the Sea of Galilee's basin, depriving it of the ability to reach the Dead Sea. The second critical point was the construction of the National Water Carrier of Israel in the 1960s, after which the amount of water flowing into the Dead Sea decreased even more. This reduction's primarily due to the increased use of water from the Jordan River and its sources. Back then, around 50 dams were built in various watersheds in Jordan and Syria. They were needed to harness water from rivers and streams, and once again, the Dead Sea was left with just scraps. But if only the problems of the water body ended there. It's time to get to know Dead Sea Works. This is an Israeli potash plant standing on the shores of the Dead Sea. The company Dead Sea Works, nationalized in 1951, grew out of a private potash factory founded back in 1930. In 1961, the Israeli parliament granted the conglomerate exclusive rights for the next 69 years to develop a significant part of the Dead Sea and use most of the surrounding land for various activities. The term hasn't expired yet, and today it's the fourth largest producer and supplier of potash products in the world. Potash as a substance is used in fertilizers, and Israel is among the world's largest producers of it. But of course, the Dead Sea doesn't feel any better for it. This is what the channel looks like. The one that carries the water pumped from the Dead Sea up to the evaporation ponds of the plant. Besides potash, which is used as a fertilizer, magnesium is also extracted here and exported as metal for the car industry. Plus there's bromide. It's often used in pesticides. In addition to the already mentioned Dead Sea Works operating on the Israeli side, the Dead Sea is also being developed by another private company, Arab Potash Company, but on the Jordanian side. The Dead Sea is also an economic driver for Israel, which ironically poses a threat to the lake's future. A market research report published in 2022 showed that the Dead Sea-based cosmetics market is expected to reach $2.6 billion by 2031. Meanwhile, as of 2018, chemical factories making cosmetics pump over 61 billion gallons of seawater annually. This just makes the condition of the Dead Sea worse, which is already struggling due to mining operations. You know, all that pumping of water into huge evaporation ponds I talked about? But perhaps we should take a closer look at them. The expansion of the salt evaporation ponds at the southern end of the Dead Sea can be observed from space. And Israel wasn't the only one involved in this expansion. Here's what the ponds looked like in 1989. And here's what they looked like by 2001. Today, the evaporation ponds are huge, and you can also see in this image how much the shape of the Dead Sea itself has changed. The left side of the ponds belongs to Israel, and the right side to Jordan, with a noticeable boundary in between. By the way, in Israel, these pools are called Ein Bokek. It's a resort with hotels, restaurants, and shopping centers, and it's now considered one of the most developed areas on the shores of the Dead Sea. But few people realize that Ein Bokek is located on the edge of an evaporation pond covering 31 square miles, where there used to be a lake before it dried up. But how exactly does the evaporation process happen, even with tourists not being a problem? Actually, the extraction process starts with pumping brine from the northern part of the sea into evaporating ponds in the southern part about 9 miles away. A pump station from ICL Dead Sea is used for this. Then, in the evaporation ponds, minerals and various raw materials are extracted, including potassium, magnesium, bromine, and sodium chloride. And potassium, as I mentioned before, is used in agriculture, and so it's important that the food security of the world's growing population literally depends on it. The process of mineral extraction and production at ICL Dead Sea is called one of the most efficient in the world. They say it's thanks to a combination of high mineral concentration in the water, a natural evaporation process, and some unique knowledge the company has gathered over the years. They also say that the evaporation process provides a significant portion of the energy needed for mineral extraction, which is why ICL Dead Sea uses less fossil fuel compared to similar industries worldwide. All in all, they're doing great on all fronts. ICL Dead Sea also emphasizes that it pumps water out of the Dead Sea, and after extracting the minerals, it redirects the remaining water back. The difference between the amount of water taken and the amount returned is around 42 billion gallons per year. For example, in 2022, ICL Dead Sea pumped about 125 billion gallons of water from the Dead Sea into evaporation ponds, of which about 81 billion gallons were returned to the sea. The company also claims that the increased rate of the Dead Sea water level decline is due to the reduced amount of wastewater flowing into the Dead Sea during the winter months. It has absolutely nothing to do with the increased activity of potash plants in the summer months or direct evaporation from the lake's surfaces. Plus, according to the same company, the drop in the Dead Sea's water level of about 33 inches will continue even if the company's industrial operations come to a complete halt. In the current situation, the ICL Dead Sea site's share of the annual water depletion in the Dead Sea is around 23%. Environmentalists, however, say it's about 40%. But the company's sure if ICL Dead Sea had stopped its operations, the sea level would have dropped by about 33 inches per year instead of 43 inches per year. In general, they're really not to blame. Moreover, it's important to remember that water is being pumped out not only from the Israeli side, but also from the Jordanian side, where there are also huge evaporation ponds for extracting valuable minerals. And companies on both sides are not interested in replenishing the Dead Sea with water, noting in their 2020 annual report that if there's less water in the reservoir, the concentration of minerals will actually increase. So what do we have in the end? The water diversion to the pools south of the Dead Sea supports the existence of two main industries in the region, mining and tourism. And I want to talk about tourism separately. According to the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, the Dead Sea is the third most popular attraction in the country. ICL Dead Sea reminds us that pumping water from the Dead Sea into the southern basin is a lifeline for the thriving tourism business in the region. You know, hotels, restaurants, shopping malls. If ICL Dead Sea stopped its operations, the southern basin would dry up completely, and that would have all sorts of consequences for tourism on the Israeli side. The constant water level maintained in these ponds allows the local tourist area to exist. Most visitors to the Dead Sea don't actually go to the lake itself. The most popular beach area on the Israeli side is the already mentioned Ein Bokek, a hub of resort hotels surrounding a large open beach along what seems like the expanse of the lake. According to locals, most hotel guests don't even know they're actually not at the Dead Sea, but in an artificially created pool. But even with the fact that no industry can have a positive impact on bodies of water, the drop in the water level of the Dead Sea by almost 70% is mainly due to the reduced flow from the Jordan River. For a while, hopes were pinned on the project of a canal between the Red Sea and the Dead Sea. The costly scheme involved desalinating seawater near the Jordanian port city of Aqaba and then sending it to the drought-stricken cities of the kingdom. The leftover brine, about 66 billion gallons, would be sent annually to the Dead Sea, helping to fight its drying out. And yes, it all sounds pretty good, but the project, originally estimated at $10 billion and deemed feasible from an engineering standpoint, faced bureaucratic and financial obstacles. In the end, in June 2021, the project was shut down by the Jordanian government, who cited a lack of interest from Israel. It should be noted, though, that Israeli media are writing about the possible revival of the project. In 2022, a political document from the Ministry of Environmental Protection was released, recommending a return to a version of the plan with a total cost of just over $87 million to be divided between Israel and donor countries. According to this plan, the first stage was to bring 105 billion gallons of salty water into the Dead Sea. Why that exact amount? Some studies warn that exceeding 105 billion gallons per year could lead to gypsum forming on the lake's surface. So if the mixing of salty water goes well, in the second stage, 198 billion gallons will flow into the Dead Sea. The document suggests that an annual inflow of about 198 billion gallons of water from various sources, including the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, could stabilize the condition of the dying Dead Sea. Unfortunately, I haven't found any more recent information. I've also come across another similar project, which is still in the research phase. It's also aimed at saving the Dead Sea, but this time using the Mediterranean Sea. And here they plan not just to pump water into the dying body of water, but also to generate electricity at the same time. Water will be pumped from the Mediterranean Sea to desalination plants in the mountains above the Dead Sea. Fresh water will flow into a reservoir, while the concentrate left over from the desalination process will be stored in special ponds. In the evenings, when solar power isn't available but electricity demand is high, the concentrated salty water from the ponds will be pumped into the Dead Sea through hydroelectric plants, generating electricity for the population. In general, this project is about creating something like a pumped storage hydroelectric plant. We've already made a few videos on this topic. Is there anything else that can be done? Actually, it's worth a shot. Not long ago, Israel and Jordan reached agreements on water resource cooperation, including a deal to restore the Jordan River, the main source of fresh water flowing into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea and the sacred Jordan River are treasures of the past and legacies for our future, said King Abdullah of Jordan at the UN Climate Change Conference. However, the agreement on the Jordan River announced by Israel apparently doesn't save the Dead Sea from danger. Therefore, the World Bank, the Israeli government, and the Middle Eastern Environmental Organization for Peace have made several proposals to restore the lake. One of the suggested solutions is to increase the flow of the Jordan River to help refill the Dead Sea. Well, that makes sense. Another proposal would require mining companies to pay for the restoration of the lake. Also makes sense. But it's important to understand one thing. If people in the region want to bring water back to the Dead Sea, they'll have to find new sources of water. That means if less water is coming from the Jordan River for the usual human needs, those needs won't go anywhere. And neither will the people. Besides, as the climate warms up, the desert region around the Dead Sea is getting hotter and rainfall is becoming more scarce. Meanwhile, the population is growing and the already limited water resources are in higher demand, so the Dead Sea is getting less and less water. That's why the most realistic solution for the countries around the Dead Sea is to switch to desalinated water, but it's an expensive option. As for the Dead Sea, it would need more than 264 million gallons of water per year to recover to the previous level. That's roughly equivalent to the entire agricultural sector's consumption over the same period. Pulling something like that off would be a challenge anywhere, let alone in one of the driest places on Earth. So what will happen to the Dead Sea next? We'll see. The biggest news of the day is that I have a headache. My condolences to all the weather-sensitive people. Sinkholes by the sea. Remember what I said at the very beginning of the video? The Dead Sea is famous for its sinkholes? No, not even that. A whole bunch of sinkholes. These sinkholes pose a huge threat to the infrastructure, residents, agriculture, and tourism around this body of water, and it seems like there's no way to escape this threat. In recent decades, the number of sinkholes has been steadily increasing, especially along the shoreline on the west and east sides of the Dead Sea. As I mentioned, it's believed that the main cause is the rapid drop in the water level around 39 to 59 inches per year. The way it works is pretty simple. Sinkholes form because of the dissolution of minerals like gypsum, calcite, and salt. The retreat of the water from the Dead Sea triggers groundwater flow, which is the driving force behind the mineral dissolution process. As for the sinkholes themselves, they can be completely different. Some are narrow but deep holes up to 65 feet, others are shallow but wide gaps as much as 262 feet. And they're all dangerous, not just in theory. On the shores of the Dead Sea, the land literally collapses. It's known that trucks and small buildings in Israel and Jordan have already fallen into the sinkholes. Beaches and plantations were closed and roads were rerouted to avoid over 5,500 sinkholes that dot the region. And this is actually a huge problem. Thanks to constant research, scientists have learned to identify the most dangerous spots, but stopping the formation of new sinkholes is incredibly hard. One possible solution could be a canal or pipeline to bring water to the Dead Sea from the Red or Mediterranean seas, the closest unlimited sources of water. I've already mentioned this project today, but no pipelines have been built so far. There's still not enough data to know if this could really help. Sinkhole warnings. I just mentioned that solving the problem of sinkholes is difficult. However, scientists can now at least predict where a potentially dangerous collapse might occur. Researchers have found mineral formations at the bottom of the Dead Sea that can reach a height of about 3 feet, and they form when minerals spontaneously crystallize from groundwater. Do you get the logic? When the groundwater flows out from the bottom of the lake, it brings with it a huge amount of salt. So where there's a salt column, there's also a hole from where that salt came out, and then when the water recedes and the salt dissolves, the hole becomes dangerous for people. According to scientists, these formations can be different. Some can grow several inches a day, others are narrow, and some can reach up to 23 feet in height and 6 to 10 feet in diameter at their peak. There's no information on whether the size of the salt columns affect the size of the future sinkhole, but at least it's some kind of clue for scientists. Mass drying of lakes. According to a new study, since the early 1990s, the area of more than half of the world's large lakes and reservoirs has shrunk. So you get it, right? This is a global issue, and it's not just about the Dead Sea. An international team of scientists analyzed almost 2,000 of the world's largest lakes for a study, the results of which were published in the journal Science. Using satellite images along with climate data and hydrological models, the scientists found a significant drop in water volume in 53% of these bodies of water between 1992 and 2020. According to the study's findings, major sources of fresh water, including the Caspian Sea and Lake Titicaca, we're losing water at a rate of about 22 gigatons per year. And this has been going on for nearly 30 years. As for the reasons behind the rapid shrinking of lakes, a hydrologist from the University of Virginia who led the study said the most obvious causes are climate warming and human water consumption. This has even affected wet regions. They've also faced significant water loss. Other reasons include changes in rainfall and runoff patterns, as well as sediment deposition. In short, water bodies are threatened by literally everything. If we look more closely at excessive water consumption by humans, it's led to the drying up of lakes like the Aral Sea and the Dead Sea. When it comes to rising temperatures, it's affected evaporation from water bodies in Afghanistan, Egypt, and Mongolia. However, there have been cases where water levels increased, mostly due to the construction of dams in remote areas like the Inner Tibetan Plateau. But this isn't really something to celebrate, as dams have plenty of downsides. This whole worrying situation with the lakes could only get worse. According to scientists, the world will hit the critical warming threshold of 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit within this decade, and according to the latest data from the World Meteorological Organization, this could happen within 5 years. And it's not just that. Extreme weather events are already becoming more frequent and intense because of the climate crisis. For example, in 2023, intense heat waves affected Asia, Europe, and Africa, and at the same time, wildfires were destroying huge areas. For now, there's only one way out: reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If we don't, by the end of the century, the world will experience a 5.4 degree Fahrenheit increase, and the consequences? I think you can imagine that nothing good's coming our way. New hotels on the coastline. Did I already mention that to the south of the Dead Sea is one of the most popular resorts in Israel? Well, the country plans to turn this place into one of the most popular tourist destinations on the planet. Plans to build a series of new hotels along the Dead Sea will focus on modernizing tourism in the region and transforming the coastline. To achieve this, a number of artificial islands, peninsulas, and bays are set to be created. There's also a plan for a tropical-style hotel with guest cottages elevated on stilts in the area. This will expand the coastline and accommodate more tourists on the water than ever before. Israeli authorities believe that boosting tourism at the Dead Sea is the key to reaching the goal of 10 million visitors per year by 2030. Another aim of the project is to double the number of tourist accommodations at the Dead Sea by adding 4,000 to 5,000 rooms along the expanded coastline by 2026. But how will this affect the state of the Dead Sea itself? Hopefully the plans take into account the possible consequences. You owe me a like. See you later.